Thank you, Mr. Springford. You are a Senior Research Fellow of the Center for European Reform of London. Thank you for coming to Foro de Foros here in La Granja. Le hemos preguntado a John Springford, que es Senior Research Fellow en el Center for European Reform en Londres, dos preguntas en concreto. En primer lugar, ¿cuáles serían los tres principales problemas que hacen que Europa no alcance el consenso necesario para ser una superpotencia de modo similar a como son Estados Unidos y China? Y luego la segunda pregunta que le hemos planteado a John Springford en concreto es cuál es su opinión con respecto al Brexit, es decir, al proceso iniciado por el gobierno británico de referéndum y de convocatoria electoral de cara a una hipotética salida de Gran Bretaña de la Unión Europea. Estas son las respuestas que nos transmite ahora a continuación.
I think the three biggest problems that Europe faces are largely internal, or at least they are about Europe's neighbourhood as well as its internal problems. And I think a lot of us have lost hope that the EU is going to be the kind of power which is able to project its values strongly across its borders. And that's a result of three crises essentially. The first one is the euro crisis, which is, it's in abeyance. It hasn't completely ended. We still have very high debt levels among some of the member states. We have a deflationary environment. And when the next downturn comes, there will be very few levers that governments are going to be able to pull. The other two big problems are to do with the neighbourhood. One of them is obviously the migration crisis, the refugee crisis, and the fact that leaders cannot agree essentially how those refugees are going to be distributed, and they cannot really agree, or they cannot necessarily have the power to be able to control the external border of Schengen. And the final problem continues to be Russia, and the fact that this is a revisionist power which is trying to expand its sphere of influence into Central and Eastern into Central Asia and Eastern Europe. And so far, the European Union has held it together and imposed sanctions on Russia, which are hurting. And that's one reason why fighting in the Ukraine has fallen back somewhat. But it's still not a problem that has been solved. I think that Brexit affects two of the four pillars of the European Union. And the four pillars are obviously, well, to me, they are the Schengen free borderless Europe. They are the euro, the single currency. They are the single market. And they are the attempt to try and create a security policy which includes justice and home affairs. And obviously the UK does not participate in the euro and doesn't participate in Schengen. So the big risks really to the European Union that will come from Brexit, at least in the technical sense, are to the single market. The European Union will lose the second largest economy in the single market. It will have to deal with the biggest free trade negotiation that it has ever done with the UK in order to try and unpick the relationship between the UK and the EU and decide which parts are going to continue as they were, which parts are going to be changed. And that will be an extremely messy and politically toxic process. And then when it comes to the security policy of the European Union, then the UK with France is one of the two countries which is able to project its power abroad. That has been diminishing with the cuts to the defence budget that the UK has been undertaking. But it has a seat at the Security Council and is the most Atlanticist power in the European Union. So relations between the EU and the US will be less strong as a result of Brexit. But politically, the thing that really terrifies me about Brexit is what it will do politically to the European Union. It will be a huge blow to its prestige. It will embolden the Eurosceptics, which are on the march in several states in Scandinavia, also in Central and Eastern Europe, and also in France with the rise of the Front National. And I worry very much that it will create a precedent for disintegration, which may spread to other countries. I'm more optimistic than pessimistic about the outcome of the vote. Obviously, there's all to play for. It's very close. The opinion polls are showing that Leave and Remain are about equal. But I think that ultimately Britons will vote to remain in the European Union, largely because they will come to realise that the British exit from the EU will essentially be a bureaucratic and political nightmare. And while they're not necessarily very enamoured with the European Union, they don't necessarily feel its effects daily. Migration is perhaps the thing that they're most upset about, but the people who are most upset about migration tend to live in areas where there aren't very many migrants. And so my sense is that while they don't like the EU, once they come to learn that it's going to essentially dominate British politics if they do vote to leave the European Union, the question is going to dominate British politics for a decade. I think they will decide that it's not really worth the bother.
Thank you very much, Mr. Springford, for your opinions, and thank you for coming here these days in For the Foros. Thank you.